friends. My name is Dr. Marissa May. In this video, we'll be answering some questions based on this graph that we see. Let's begin, first of all, with f of -1. Now, I like to put this into words. So what this really means is, what is the y value when x is -1? Let me say that again. This question is asking, what is the y value when x is -1? So when x is -1, we would be right here. And we want to know, what is the y value on the graph? And that would be -18. So we're reading this information from the graph, but we have to know what we're looking for. Let's look at this one, asking ourselves, what is the range? Well, I hope you see that we have a maximum value at this point at the top of the parabola. And this is our highest y value. So if I want to write my range, I'm going to say all the y values stay below or stay less than -1. So one way I could write the range is to say that y is less than or equal to -1. But another way I could say it, if my instructions happen to ask me for interval notation, I would say that is from -infinity to -1, and I would use a bracket to show that it is also equal to -1 there. Then we want an equation for this graph. Well, the beauty of this is that it is a quadratic. So I know it's going to be working in a parabola, an x to the second kind of pattern. I also know with this high point that that is called the vertex. And so our vertex is at 1, -2 right here. Notice the axis go by twos there. So I know that I can use what's called vertex form. I've got this quadratic, and I am putting the vertex. You can see where I put the 1 inside the parentheses with the x. Yes, I intended that to be a -1. It should be a -1. And then on the outside, I put the y value, which is a -2 for the -2. Then I have this a value. This is like the stretch factor, right? That I may or may not know just from visually looking at the graph. However, the beauty is I can find out what that a value is. And I'm going to use a pretty easy value. I'm going to choose another point on the graph, super simple. I'm going to choose this 0, -6, because who doesn't like to use a 0? Super easy. And I'm going to sub those in for x and y. So I'm going to make y -6, and I'm going to make x 0. And then I'm going to solve for that a value, that stretching factor. So I've got -6 equals a times 0 minus 1 is -1 squared, +1. Love that. And then -2. So now if I move over that -2, I get that a is -4. And so my equation would be y equals that -4 times the x minus 1 to the second minus 2. And that's my equation for this graph. And what I hope you can see is I saw the vertex in the graph, so I put it in vertex form, but then I used another point to help me solve for that stretching factor because I visually didn't see that stretching factor right off the bat. Okay, let's look at if g of x is x minus 4, then what is f of g of 4? So this one is a little bit using two approaches because we have an equation for one function and we have a graph for another. So we got to put that together. We're going to start by rewriting this f of g of x as f of g of 4. Okay, and we're going to work on the inside. We're going to do g of 4 first. Remember, that means what is the y value on g of x when x is 4? And so I'm going to replace this x with a 4. So 4 minus 4 gives me 0. Well, my answer is not 0. My answer is f of 0. So let's think about what this means. This says, okay, what is the y value on the f graph when x is 0? So go on your f graph. When x is 0, what's your y value? And that's that one we used right there, right? That 0, -6. And so my answer here would be -6. That's a doozy of a problem because you've got to use an equation for one part of for one function, and then you got to go look at the graph for the other function. So I want you to stay focused. It's a great question because it asks you to use two representations, but I want you to not get confused on what you're looking for. So if you need to, go back and just rewind this video through this section and ask yourself the same questions I'm asking. What is the y value when x is 0 on the f of x graph? Like when you just get into the routine of saying that to yourself, it's going to sink in. Practice makes progress. All right, so now we're going to go one step further, and that is to draw a graph of this f of g of x. Hang with me here because we've got to pay attention to all the details. All right, so I'm going to build a table for us. And we are going to just do some positives, some negatives, 0, of course, to get just a view of what's going on with this graph. Of course, after we do that, we're going to look for some patterns. Remember, we're going into g of x first. So we're going to do f of g of -2. Okay, doing g of -2 first. We're going to replace this x with a -2. So -2 minus 4. So that would be f of -2 minus 4 or f of -6. And friends, our graph is not that wide. So this one I'm not going to be able to use simply because I don't have that I don't have that x value on this graph here. Okay, so let's do, let's see, we're probably going to have to do the 2. That's probably be the first one we can do. We'll just have to change our x values here. We'll do the 2. Actually, let's do 3. Okay. So we'll do f of g of 3. Okay. So that means f of 3 minus 4. So that is f of -1. Now remember what that means. That means to go on the graph when x is -1, what is the y value? And that, my friends, is -18. Good. That is way out there, right? Like let's shift it over. Okay. Let's do when x is 4. So when x is 4, we'll do f of 4 minus 4, which is f of 0, which tells us, okay, when x is 0 on the graph, what's y? That's -6. Let's do one more. I think you're going to see the pattern. Let's do 5. When we get 5 minus 4, so f of 5 minus 4 would really be f of 1, which would be -2. Okay, so when we're at 3, -18, that's going to be way down here. Okay, then we've got 4, -6, which would be here. Then we've got 5, -2, which is here. And then you can continue the pattern, right? We're just doing the parabola shifted over, right? Shifted over. But that's how I do it point by point, okay, until I can see that pattern. And many of you may be going, well, I know x minus 4 when it's on the inside means to shift right 4. And you're right. That's exactly what this is. However, sometimes we don't see that from the very beginning. So I encourage you to do the table if that helps. Just realize that sometimes you don't have all the information. Like look at all those x values I had to skip. I couldn't use because I didn't have the x values in the graph of f of x to work with there. So I hope that helps. All right, let's do one more graph with this f of x, and that is we are making a lot of transformations. So let's talk about them. This -1 here, that simply means we're doing an x-axis reflection. So that means we're flipping it from the bottom to the top. The 2 here tells us we are stretching it, right? We're doing a vertical stretch. And then the negative with the x, that's a y-axis reflection. And that means we're flipping it from the right to the left. And then the -1 means we're going down 1. Wow, we got a lot of changes to make here, okay? Here's what I find the best way to do this is, okay? I'm going to make a table, which I've made a table for several of these already, but I'm going to make the changes accordingly. So here's the deal. I'm going to take the -2 in front, and that's what I'm going to multiply the y value by. So I'm going to multiply y by negative 2. And then I'm going to go down 1. So I'm going to subtract 1. Then I'm going to change the sign on the x. That's it. Change the sign on the x. So let's start with this point here. This is negative 1, negative 18. Okay. So I'm going to change the sign on the x to make it 1. Then with the y value, negative 18, I'm going to multiply by negative 2, which would be 36. And I'm going to subtract 1, which would be 35. Let's do another one. Let's do this one, 0, negative 6. Well, I'm going to change the sign on the x. It's still 0. Then I'm going to take the y value, negative 6. I'm going to multiply by negative 2, which is 12. Then I'll subtract 1, which is 11. Let's do this one. This is 1, negative 2. Change the sign on the x, makes it negative 1. Take the y value of negative 2, multiply by negative 2, which is 4. Subtract 1, making it 3. Then we'll do this one, which is 2, negative 6. Change the sign on the x, and we get the 11 again. And then finally, we get 3, negative 18, and we get the negative 3, 35 this time. Sorry about my video. Not sure really why that's doing that. And then, friends, you just want to graph these, and I understand that is a really big number. That 135 is going to be way up there. Then we've got 0, 11. Nice. Then I've got negative 1, 3. Negative 1, 3. Negative 2, 11. And so, friends, you get the idea for where my parabola is. Forgive my graph here not being great as I'm drawing with a stylus pen. But you get the idea of how I can make those changes point by point in my chart to help me be able to see where this parabola is going to change with these transformations I was asked to make.